The Crypto Street podcast is hosted by Crypto Dale, Prince, and Killer Whale, who can be found on Twitter at CryptoDale, at Killer Whale, K1LLERWH4LE, and at 13Prince31. None of this should be construed as investment advice. For information on how to join our private Telegram group, The Pod, please email tcsp@protonmail.com. The Crypto Street podcasts are officially sponsored by 21 Cryptos, the world's first and only cryptocurrency trading magazine. Visit 21cryptos.com and enjoy 50-plus pages of pro tips and predictions, an analysis of the best 21 coins to invest in for the month, trading lessons and articles from your favorite pros, price action event calendars, entertainment, and lots more. Stay ahead of the game and get your copy today. Visit 21cryptos.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Crypto Street Podcast. As always, my name is Crypto Dale. I'll be the host today. I'm alongside my usual co-host, Killer Whale.
Happy to be here, everybody.
And my man, Prince.
Hey, guys.
Prince, how's the weather up there in Canada?
I was wearing shorts today and a t-shirt, so
that's nuts.
Go figure.
Today's guest started his career as CEO of Memory Dealers and has since become an established name in cryptocurrency. While at Memory Dealers, he led the charge of them becoming the first business to accept Bitcoin. He is a founding member and board advisor for the Bitcoin Foundation. Please join me and welcome Roger Ver to the podcast. Roger, thanks for joining us. It's great having you.
Thank you, Dale.
So being as you are one of the earliest adopters of Bitcoin, what was it that you saw in Bitcoin at the time that made you feel it would be a sound investment and maybe a movement of the future?
I guess I had the right background to really appreciate it earlier than most, having grown up in Silicon Valley and being around computers my whole life and, being a giant fan of everything computer related. So I could understand the technical side of Bitcoin. And then my hobby from somewhere around junior high school age on through at least my mid-20s had been studying economics. And so I read every economics book I could get my hand on. And if you think about it, Bitcoin is kind of a convergence of those two things, computer science and economics. And when I heard about Bitcoin and I wrapped my head around the underlying technical aspects, and then I wrapped my head around the economic characteristics of Bitcoin, I knew people were going to start using it as money. And there wasn't any doubt in my mind. So I went out and bought a pile of Bitcoin, and then I started investing in businesses and doing everything I could to build the tools to make Bitcoin easier for people to actually start using as money. And one fun little moment from that time is I was talking to another friend of mine, telling him all about Bitcoin and how this is going to change everything. And it's so exciting. And he was a bit less than convinced. And he told me on the phone, he goes, Roger, if you think Bitcoins are such a good idea, why don't you buy more of them? I told him, you're right. And so the next day I went out and bought even more.
And I find that fascinating that as a 16-year-old, you were into economics, because even as a 21-year-old finance major myself, I still had a hard time reading any economics book I could get my hand on.
Dale
Maybe you had the wrong
books.
books.
There you go. I bet it was the wrong economic books I was reading. What'd you say, Killer?
I just said Dale struggles to read to this day. Sorry.
It's true. It's very true. So, speaking of then Bitcoin, when did it dawn on you that something needed to be done, for example, Bitcoin Cash, to reduce maybe the transaction time and the fees associated with the current state of Bitcoin?
So I used to be a Bitcoin Core supporter and a Blockstream supporter and a fan of all of those guys. And it wasn't until I realized that they openly wanted Bitcoin to have high fees, and they openly wanted Bitcoin to have full blocks, and full blocks cause transaction delays, high fees, and unreliable transactions. So when I realized that they want all of these things that are detrimental to the adoption of Bitcoin, I had to speak out against that, because Bitcoin is one of the most important inventions in the history of humankind. We need to improve it, not I don't know what the opposite word of improve is, but we want to constantly improve it, not degrade the quality of Bitcoin. And if you take Bitcoin, when I first got involved in 2011, the transactions were basically free, basically instant, and uncensorable. And today the transactions are now super expensive, easy to double spend. And I don't know if you would say uncensorable anymore, because you're not even guaranteed to get a space in the block and have your transaction go through. So it went from being incredibly useful in commerce to now, by design of these block streaming core supporters, to be less useful in commerce. Another example of that was they complained about zero confirmation, and they switched that to this replace by fee thing. Well, merchants, anybody that's using Bitcoin in commerce, they want it to be acceptable. And it doesn't have to be absolutely ironclad, mathematically like impossible to reverse a double spin, but it can be good enough with a zero confirmation. It was good enough for the first several years that I was involved. And just much recently, these people, they think because a zero confirmation transaction is not as safe as a confirmed transaction, we shouldn't try to make it safe at all. But no, it's a continuum. It's not that it's either safe or it's not. There's a sliding scale, and we need to have it be as close on the sliding scale to safe as we can, even though it's not as safe as one that's actually been included in a block. And when I saw these people advocating all these things that are detrimental to the future of Bitcoin, of course I had to speak out. And I've taken a lot of hate on the internet because of speaking out. But at the end of the day, I'm here to speak the truth, not here to be popular. And if speaking the truth makes me unpopular, that's just fine too. I have no problem with that whatsoever. The truth is far more important to me than any stupid popularity contest online.
Hey, Roger, real quick, when you mentioned that Core actively wants high fees, how much of that do you think is a concerted effort by them versus Bitcoin kind of maybe becoming more popular than its code can keep up with at this point?
Well, we've already proven that it's not. Bitcoin was the only cryptocurrency in the entire history of cryptocurrencies to ever have full blocks. That's never, ever, ever happened before. So if we want to experiment and find out what happens with full blocks, we should be doing that experiment on something other than Bitcoin, something other than the market leader that has the most adoption, the most merchants, and the most everything. Talk about an incredibly reckless thing to do, is to experiment like that on the cryptocurrency that everybody's actually using. And Bitcoin didn't have high fees. Bitcoin didn't have unreliable transactions. It was when the blocks became full that just degraded the entire thing. And I have, 15, almost 20 years of helping scale enterprise networks. You never, ever, ever, ever run a network at 100% capacity all the time. That's the stupidest thing ever. Why would you do that with Bitcoin? Yet, unfortunately, that's exactly what these people have done. And sure enough, the user experience is degraded, and they've made Bitcoin go from being, fast, cheap to use and reliable to being slow, expensive to use and unreliable. Well, when something's slow, expensive to use and unreliable, people are going to seek out alternatives. And that's why we've seen Bitcoin's market share go from basically 100% to now somewhere around 50%, because people are seeking out those alternatives, whether it's Ethereum or Dash or Monero or Zcash or, take your pick. There's 1,001 altcoins out there that would love to take market share away from Bitcoin.
Absolutely.
And if they do it by being better, that's fine. But Bitcoin's having a social problem, not a technical problem.
Yeah. So I mean, you mentioned the negativity online, and I think, I think a lot of that is really unfounded. I think this issue is a bit more complex than a lot of people give it credit for. I think it's a very nuanced issue, like a lot of things. It's not a simple topic. It's not an easy thing. You need to really dive deep and really kind of dissect it. You mentioned, I think, based on my reading, you've kind of, your purpose is really to make Bitcoin Cash widespread enough to where it's insurmountable for any other coin to access it. And in that way, it will kind of reach its true purpose as like a global decentralized currency. And I get that. That makes sense to me. But what do you think about some of the flip sides of that? Like some people who say bigger blocks make things less decentralized.
Well, if you look at it right now, we have the exact proof of that. So Bitcoin has its 1 megabyte blocks, and everybody's being forced onto Coinbase to do off-chain transactions with each other. And everybody's being forced onto Zappo to do off-chain transactions with each other. Well, wow, what a centralizing effect that's had. I was talking with another pretty well-known Bitcoin business. I don't want to give their name because I don't know if they want it to be public, but they're literally saying that they're are forced to do everything off-chain on Coinbase now because the Bitcoin network is unusable. The interesting part about it is that they've told me privately, and the whole world will hear about it soon, they're switching from Bitcoin to Bitcoin Cash. And they said the reason for that is first, Bitcoin was great for every size payment, and then it became unusable for like $10 or $20 payments. And earlier tonight in his email to me, he said that now Bitcoin is unusable for $100 to $500 payments because the fees are so high. Well, Bitcoin Cash is right there ready for everybody. And if you read the original Bitcoin white paper, the title is that it's a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. I don't think anybody can say that Bitcoin Core is a cash system at this point when the fees are $30 and it takes hours or days or weeks for your transaction to go through, whereas Bitcoin Cash very clearly is a cash system at this point.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I'm kind of conflicted on this, so I'm super happy to talk with you about it. I mean, It's just the sort of thing where it's become such a polarizing thing in the community. I think people really need to look deeper into it. I think one of the things I wanted to bring up, though, is you talk about this global currency, and I think a lot of people, in my impression, is that they're using it more as like an investment and stuff like that. And I get this whole global community will make it way more widespread than it even is now. And so I get that kind of, that purpose of it. But do you think it's causing any kind of confusion about with the new people coming to the space if they don't know which Bitcoin is the real one, quote unquote? How do you feel about that?
There's definitely some confusion, and there's if you read the Bitcoin white paper, it's very, very clear that between Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin Cash is the one that's the most accurately described by the Bitcoin white paper. And if you go over even on Bitcoin.org, even right now today, it still says, low cost, fast worldwide transactions or something to that effect. And so two of those three attributes are completely gone when it comes to Bitcoin Core. It's not low cost anymore, and they're not fast anymore. Whereas Bitcoin Cash is still both of those things. So it's very, very clear that Bitcoin Cash is much more in tune with the original version of Bitcoin that I signed up for in 2011, and the one that was talked about by Satoshi Nakamoto and Gavin Andresen and these other people. And I think that's why there's so much hostility towards Bitcoin Cash from the Bitcoin Core supporters, is they know they've stolen the name and the roadmap for Bitcoin, and they don't want Bitcoin Cash to have it back, even though Bitcoin Cash is the one that's most in line with that. And yeah, you said this is a complicated issue and there's a lot of stuff going on, which is all the more reason why we should have more discussion about this and more free speech about this. And the fact of the matter is that the Bitcoin Core side of it, not all of the supporters, but a bunch of them have openly engaged in this giant censorship campaign where they'll literally delete anybody's post on our Bitcoin or Bitcoin Talk that's in opposition to the roadmap. And if you think that we should be seeking truth, we should allow more people to express their ideas and consider them and think for ourselves. Is this true or is that false? And decide. So we need more discussion, not less. Yet the Bitcoin Core supporters are openly advocating less discussion and less free speech on these topics, which I think is the exact opposite thing of what we should be doing at the moment.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying there. Just real quick, Prince, I just want to say that's something society as a whole. Don't get so emotional. Try to look at something and just look at the facts behind it and try to find the truth. That's it. Roger mentioned that. That's super important with investing. Think for yourself and really try to look at things objectively.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And the Bitcoin community, it's very, it's tribalistic, right? That's one of the biggest things I've noticed. And it's not just, Bitcoin Core. It's, it goes to Ethereum, I'm sure we're going to see it with Tezos. It's so tribalistic. So you get, these competition coming in and people just get, their backs up against the wall, right? They don't want to take it. They don't like it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, humans are a bit of a tribal animal. So they tend to cordon themselves off into tribes. And maybe some sociologist can be on your podcast next time and talk more about why that happens with people.
Yeah.
All right, so Roger, what is exactly the infrastructure around maybe Bitcoin Cash? I know Core's had countless devs and public support, but it appears Bitcoin Cash infrastructure is maybe a little unknown at this point, which I personally think that maybe that's the leading factor for some of the negative images within the public that, I've found when I first got in this. I'm the newest one out of the crew. It was right before the fork and on August 1st, and it was, the negativity towards Bitcoin Cash before it even came out was rather alarming to myself. So maybe touch base on that and go elaborate on that if you can.
Yeah, I guess one thing I really have to give Bitcoin Core and their supporters credit for is they are absolute masters of, I don't know if propaganda is the right word, but they're the absolute masters of conveying a viewpoint online as being the widespread. And I don't think it is. I think if I were to generalize a little bit, I kind of feel like the big block supporters maybe tend to be a little bit quieter and a little bit more reserved, where I'm definitely an exception to that rule. But in general, I think big block supporters seem to be less inclined to argue on the internet and attack people and engage in personal attacks. Whereas, when I go online and I say something, there's a whole bunch of small block supporters that are, saying I'm stupid, saying I'm ugly, saying I'm dumb, saying I'm fat. And there's all sorts of, personal attacks there that if I'm, dumb, stupid, and ugly, okay, that's fine. But that doesn't mean that the arguments or the ideas that I'm putting forth are false. You should address the ideas that I'm putting forth. and say why you think they're false. And basically the idea is that we need to grow cryptocurrencies as fast and as wide as we possibly can, because we're right on the verge of separating government's control of money all over the planet for every human being on the planet. When the government people figure out that that's happening, they're probably not going to like that. So we need to move quickly and faster than those people. And unfortunately, the scaling debate has set back Bitcoin and cryptocurrency adoption by several years, which is really, really frustrating. And I think I've kind of veered off track from whatever the original question was. If you have it in front of you again and can refresh my memory, I'll try and get back on track
sure.
in regards to that. Sorry.
No, that's no problem. And to elaborate on that a little more, Roger, it is pretty sad that we can't be a community where we can carry on adult conversations about obviously we're all here because we believe in cryptocurrency and we want to see it expand and broaden. And I think it's truly sad that if we're not able to have adult conversations about things that we differ on, I guess that really would be something I would like to see improve. And
it's going to hamper development if we can't do it, right?
That's exactly
absolutely.
right.
It hampers our politics right now. We lie to ourselves about the problems and we look at the wrong solutions as a result, I think, because everyone's so scared of being offended, that nobody says what they really feel. And maybe we're even veering more off track here, but I really think that's an issue in society as a whole, based on what I'm seeing. Roger, I wanted to ask you something real quick. So around the time of the fork, community support, at least from the people I was following, seemed to be mainly behind Core. In your opinion, is that due to them not really, in your opinion, again, not knowing what's best for Bitcoin? Or do you think that's maybe the result of information, being kind of exposed to them that might not necessarily be? What do you think the reason behind that was?
I think probably the biggest mistake I made in my involvement with Bitcoin, it was underestimating just how effective censorship can be in this. So I've been involved in Bitcoin for about 7 years now. And, all the way up until maybe 2015-ish when the censorship began, I was a bit of a hero within Bitcoin. And then the censorship started and nobody was allowed to say anything nice about me at this point. And in our Bitcoin, every day there's all sorts of things about how I'm trying to attack Bitcoin and trying to hurt Bitcoin, and I'm anti-Bitcoin. And at first, when the censorship started, like everybody that had been around knew, like, that's a bunch of nonsense. Of course, Roger's not trying to hurt Bitcoin. Roger's poured his heart and soul into this. But now there's all these people that came to Bitcoin much more recently. And if they don't even hear about RBTC or any of the uncensored platforms, and they only go to our Bitcoin or Bitcoin Talk, and they see all these people saying that Roger and Jihan and these other people are, the Chinese miners are trying to destroy Bitcoin, they don't know any better because people aren't allowed to post anything to the contrary. And I guess one point that I'd like to touch on that ties right back in with your point from a moment ago is that when it looks like everybody's saying something and they have a unified voice that's different from your opinion, that's when it's the most important for you to speak out. And the reason being is because there might be a whole bunch of other people out there that think the same way you do, but they look around and they see everybody saying the opposite. So they think, oh, everybody's saying the opposite, I guess I'll be quiet. But when they see the first person break rank and say, hey, I believe the opposite of what all these people online are saying, they'll think, oh, I guess I'm not the only one that thinks that. And then they feel a bit more comfortable to speak out as well. And that's part of why day after day after day, even though it's not in line with the party roadmap from Core, I say what I genuinely think, because I think I'm not the only person out there that has these ideas. And in fact, I'm sure I'm not. I get so many emails every day from people saying, hey, I don't participate in the discussions online, but I just want to let you know I saw you on this chat or heard you on that podcast, and I really appreciate what you say, and I agree with it. And there's lots of us out there. And I think there are lots of us out there, but if all of us are quiet, none of us will know about the other ones. And that's why it's so important to speak out, even when you think you're the only one in the entire world that thinks that. That's when it's the most important for you to speak out, so these other people that have that same point of view can realize that they're not alone and they're not the only one in the world thinking that way.
It's funny because, even there's more and more traders I talk with, and, openly online, you'll never see them say that they're supporting Bitcoin Cash, but one-on-one conversations, they're starting to turn over to it because, they see the value in it. So it is, to touch on that point, it's really bang on.
Yeah, so all the more reason for you guys to speak out and tell the world what you really believe. Whether or not you're a Cash supporter or a Core supporter, say what you really think.
You know what, Roger? To be honest with you, I'm not sure which one I think is a better path forward yet. I'm not even sure I really know enough technically to even say to have a good opinion on that.
Shall we give you a
to be
live
honest with
demo?
you.
Do you have a Bitcoin wallet on your phone?
I do, yes. But
give me a Bitcoin Core address, if you don't mind. I'm going to send you money over Skype here. So although I feel bad I think it's going to be an audio only, but I'll explain what we're doing as we do it for the podcast. So
okay.
Do you want mine too, Roger? No, I'm just
Let me get one. Hang on one sec.
Go ahead and pull up your Bitcoin Core address.
Okay. This will be interesting.
And hold it up to the screen for me to scan there.
Okay.
And I'll scan it.
Can I show you the address itself, or do you need the QR code?
The QR code would be easier for me to scan over Skype. If you have a wallet app, it should display a QR code.
You know what, man? I'd have to grab my Tracer, I think. It's going to be... Yeah.
I know a great wallet I can recommend. The Bitcoin.com wallet has a fantastic wallet that displays the QR code.
By the way, hold on real quick. I have a question. Somebody was telling me that defaults to... Which Bitcoin does that default to?
It supports both. So it supports both Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin Cash, and they're very, very clearly labeled. And a bunch of troublemakers on the internet have been claiming that we're trying to deceive people. Like if you install the app and look at it, the only people that would be confused as to which wallet you're using at the time is somebody with like an IQ of less than 70. And anybody else, they're different colors. They're in different sections. Like they're labeled differently. Like there's absolutely no doubt whatsoever which version of Bitcoin you're using within the app, and it supports both. And it's very, very clear which one you're using. So it's just people looking to make trouble for no reason at all, other than the fact that they don't like Bitcoin Cash. Have been complaining about that sort of thing. So
I'll echo what Killer said, Roger. At first, I'll be honest, I was 100% core. But then once you kind of said you'd be on here, I thought I'd do a little more research so I could better understand it. And now I really don't know for sure either which one.
If somebody does have a Bitcoin wallet, I'll give a really, really powerful demonstration. And if somebody doesn't have it handy, I'll explain what would happen.
I wish I could get my camera working because I could pull mine up right now, but I can't get this thing to flip on.
Maybe I can explain
just walk us through. Yeah, exactly.
If I were to try and send right over Skype, if someone were to hold up their QR code, I could send $10 of Bitcoin Core. And in fact, let me pull up an address here so I can tell you exactly what the fee would wind up being. And I'm going to scan it right now. So I'm scanning an address of my Bitcoin.com wallet. And if I were to send, let's say, $10 in Bitcoin Core, then the recommended network fee at the moment is $15.86. So I'll be spending over $15 in fees to send the $10. And when the $10 would arrive in your wallet, you would get the $10, it would be in your wallet. But then if you went to try and go and spend it, it wouldn't be spendable because the fees to go and spend the $10 would be more than the $10 that's in your wallet. So I would effectively be spending $25 to make a Bitcoin transaction that's then not spendable anymore. Whereas if I were to go and send you Bitcoin Cash right over Skype from my phone to yours, the fee will literally be a third of a penny, and it'll be included right there in the next block from my phone to your phone with no chance of a double spend. It'll actually work.
Is it really that expensive to send regular Bitcoin transactions? Though I feel like I've sent many that have been cheaper than that lately.
Oh, I've had ones that I send $150 in fees and takes 4 or 5 hours to show up.
The delays are definitely a real thing and annoying. Yeah.
We receive a lot of payments too. Just the other week, I had to send $20,000 of Bitcoin out of that wallet, and I sent it directly to an exchange to buy more Bitcoin Cash. But the fee to send the $20,000 was over $1,000 US, right? So that's a lot, right? So I had to pay more than 5% of the funds in fees. Whereas if I did that with Bitcoin Cash, it would be less than a penny, which is how Bitcoin used to be, mind you. Most Bitcoin Core transactions used to be free or a fraction of a penny, and it wasn't until the blocks became full that the prices got higher and higher and higher. And Bitcoin had this giant first mover advantage and giant network effect where even today, I'm moving as much of our infrastructure as we can, as fast as we can to Bitcoin Cash, but we still have to do a lot of Bitcoin Core transactions because not all the infrastructure has been switched over yet, and that we pay thousands and thousands of dollars in fees every week.
In your opinion, are there downsides to raising the block size?
I can't really think of any, to be honest.
You think, is it more expensive to run a node if the block sizes are bigger? Does that lead to more centralization?
I mean, it's true that it would become more expensive to run a node, but you can literally run a node on a $25 Raspberry Pi today. And if for anybody that's done any mining, just one of these Bitmain S9s, I think, is around $1,300, and the professional miners are buying those by the tens of thousands at a time. You can have more transactions on chain than Visa right now today, and validate all of them on a computer that's less than $2,000, so less than the cost of two S9s. That's not a problem at all. So instead of allowing Bitcoin to compete with all these other payment systems all over the world for the price of two S9 miners, we're holding back the entire world's free payment system of Bitcoin so that people can continue to run it on their Raspberry Pis. And the fact of the matter is, if you've been around Bitcoin for any amount of time, you should be able to afford a more expensive computer than Raspberry Pi. And the other fact of the matter is, you don't need to run a full node. The vast majority of people aren't running full nodes. So I guess the question is, what's the downside of allowing bigger blocks? It makes it more expensive to run a full node, but suddenly you have the entire world's population to draw upon, and all the businesses all over the world to run those full nodes. So I think you're going to wind up with a much larger absolute number of full nodes. And it's the absolute number that counts, not the percentage of people that are running a full node.
Yeah, and I really do agree with your notion of sort of dominance by widespread, just crushing every other every other coin. And whether you're a Bitcoin or a Bitcoin Cash supporter, I think there are a lot of Bitcoin maximalists. There are some Bitcoin Cash maximalists, but you got to at least see Roger's point of view, which to me makes sense. And so I know you get a lot of shit, Roger, which I think a lot of it's unjustified, to be honest. I think, again, these things are more nuanced. But again, you got to do the research. These things are not as black and white as a lot of people on Twitter would have you think.
Hey, Roger, let's go back real quick on Bitcoin Cash fees. So I know you kind of said that when Bitcoin first was around, the fees were very minute, if almost non-existent. Do you feel that maybe as Bitcoin Cash grows or evolves into, say, the size of Bitcoin, that those fees would maybe mirror what they are of Bitcoin, or how do you see that playing out?
The only reason Bitcoin Core has high fees today is because of this social issue, where a bunch of developers managed to gain control of the project's spirit and convince the public that Bitcoin needs to have high fees and needs to have full blocks, which is the exact opposite, because we have 7 years of empirical evidence when Bitcoin went from nothing to this worldwide phenomenon that it is today, with Bitcoin never having full blocks. And most transactions were completely free. There was no fee at all. The way it worked in the earlier days is that if the Bitcoins had been sitting on an address for long enough, it was completely free to use. And you only had to pay a small fee if the Bitcoins had just recently been moved. So that would prevent people from just churning their Bitcoins to make a bunch of frivolous transactions. But if your Bitcoins had stayed for, sure, I don't remember the exact amount of time, but maybe a couple of days at an address, it was completely free. And if they had just arrived there, an hour before, then maybe you pay a fraction of a penny to move them. And it wasn't until much later that all this changed. So if you have 7 years of empirical evidence of knowing what worked and worked incredibly well to drive merchant adoption, to drive user adoption, to drive adoption all over the world, don't change that formula. Yet, unfortunately, that's exactly what Bitcoin Core has done. They've taken that formula of fast, safe, reliable, on-chain transactions, and they've turned it on its head and now made Bitcoin slow, expensive to use, and unreliable. Well, you don't have to be a genius to figure out if you have two versions of Bitcoin, one that's fast, cheap, and reliable, and the other is slow, expensive, and unreliable. It's pretty clear which one people are going to start to use. And
so I'm like, Dale, you mentioned your kind of experience going back and forth with Core and Cash, and I've had an interesting road too. It's like when I first got into cryptocurrencies, probably about a year and a half ago, this debate was still kind of happening. It was going on. And in my mind, I go, why wouldn't you want bigger blocks? I mean, it just seems like such an obvious move. You can handle more transactions. It makes the network able to handle way more people. I mean, it's a fairly straightforward thing. And then I went to, and then I did some more research, and then I went to Core, and now I don't know. And again, you constantly have to be reading on this stuff. I mean, this is a very complex issue with a lot of different factors in play. And I totally see the advantages of Cash, and I see some advantages of Core. But again, this is not the sort of issue. So many people just write it off. They just go, I got my Bitcoin Cash, I'm going to sell it, just screw that. It's like, it's not that simple. I mean, I don't see why you would do that.
It's funny because I find Core it's almost dwarfed. That idea of Bitcoin is dwarfed into something that is different from, like you said, Roger, it's not what the white paper was, the original white paper. It has truly dwarfed into something else. It's almost like a commodity at this point, a digital commodity, because you don't want to trade it, right? Or, buy things with it, right? Like, it's not user friendly at all for it. You're paying these huge fees. So, it is this thing where core has dwarfed into this, new kind of thing. It isn't the original white paper. It isn't. Anyone who reads it will know that. So.
I will say I do think a lot of people don't spend it because it's going up so much too. I mean, it's painful for me to spend Bitcoin right now.
I guess one experiment for everybody that's on the fence that isn't sure which one is more useful, get some Bitcoin Core and get some Bitcoin Cash and send some of it from one phone to another or from your computer to another, and then send it back to yourself, and then look at how long it took for each one and look at how much it cost you for each one. And I think anybody will be able to make up their mind really quickly when you see that Bitcoin Core is basically unusable for anything, for any sort of transaction that's less than $1,000 at this point.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, Roger, aside from what the media is always covering with you betting on the rise of Bitcoin Cash, are there any other coins or any other sectors of the cryptocurrency you have your eyes on that you like for any reason?
The biggest area where Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin Cash both are lacking is in privacy. And that was one of the other things that was really, really frustrating for me with Bitcoin Core and them intentionally making the fees high and the blocks full, is that made it so people couldn't use these Bitcoin mixers or privacy services anymore because they became way too expensive and too slow. And that undermined Bitcoin's fungibility. And one of the characteristics that makes money is fungibility. And fungibility is just another way of saying privacy. So if Bitcoin isn't private and every Bitcoin can't be the same as every other form of Bitcoin, then it's not good money. And so with Bitcoin Cash now, we're starting to see all the mixers come back on Bitcoin Cash. And there's some new project that just announced yesterday. I think it's called Bitcoin Shuffle or Cash Shuffle, I think is what it's called. And I'll have to do some more reading about it. I don't know enough about it yet, but privacy is super, super, super important to make something useful as money. So I'm definitely a big fan of things like Monero and Zcoin and Zcash and Dash and all the coins that have privacy built in. So,
love Monero. +1.
Yeah, for sure. I think
big
privacy
fan of Monero
coins
as
are
well.
going to be huge.
Yeah. And ideally people can build privacy tools on top of Bitcoin Cash because it already has this bigger network effect than all the other privacy coins that I mentioned. But, good investing advice is to not ever put all your eggs in one basket. So I'd buy some Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash. I would even recommend holding a little bit of Bitcoin Core because you never know what's going to happen. But, buy some of these other privacy coins as well. Those are the ones that I'm really big on. And then Ethereum has an amazing ecosystem going as well. So buy some Ethereum as well.
Yeah, really, I agree with that. I mean, I would see things like, just to go show you how biased crypto can be. I mean, when I first got into crypto, I would go on the Bitcoin Reddit and then I'd go on the Ethereum Reddit. And when I was on the Bitcoin Reddit, people are always shitting on Ethereum, just absolutely crapping on it, saying it had a terrible community, a bunch of dumb people. And my experience in the Ethereum community could not have been more opposite of that. It was friendly people who were smart, they were driven, they were ambitious. And it showed me that, I mean, people, they get an idea, they hear it from somebody else, they see it's popular, and they run with it, whether it's true or not. And this happens in every facet of life. So keep an eye out for it.
Tribalism.
I don't know where I lost my train of thought there, but I was going somewhere.
And
privacy
I recently went to DEF CON in Mexico for the big Ethereum conference. And if you wonder where all the big block supporters in Bitcoin went, they all went to Ethereum, they all went to Dash, they all went to these other altcoins because Core managed to strangle Bitcoin adoption and Bitcoin's growth. So they went somewhere else. And it was really, I can't count how many people at the Ethereum conference and said, "Hey, Roger, great work with Bitcoin Cash. We support you. I used to be all in Bitcoin and I left because of, the toxicity of the core people engaging in censorship and these personal attacks." And if you join the Bitcoin Cash community too, you'll see we don't knock other altcoins. Like, more power to the Dash and Zcash and Monero and Ethereum communities. Like, I hope they build awesome products that make the world a better place. I have no problem with that whatsoever. It only seems to be in the Bitcoin Core community that they say every other coin is a scam or a Ponzi scheme or something, negative. Whereas, I think we're seeing this Darwinian evolution of currencies, and the more experiments people try, the more likely there's some real good ones to come out of it that the entire world gets to benefit from.
If you can, give a quick update on the Bitcoin Cash debit card. What kind of regulatory issues have you faced so far with that?
So we're still in the negotiating of the exact terms of the contract and what the fees are going to be and the limits and this and that. Hopefully we'll be able to accept people from every country. The countries that are high on the list that of not being likely to be able to be accepted are, North Korea, Iran, places like that, and then the United States. So we'll see if we can get the United States in there. But it's actually true. Like, those are the countries we're not allowed to deal with, the countries that the U.S. has sanctioned, because that's really dangerous for us. And it's probably a bit dangerous for us to serve U.S. customers as well. So we'll have the lawyers figure all that out, and we'll serve as many people as we possibly can. But at the end of the day, I think people in Iran and Iraq and, even North Korea, I think they should be able to use Bitcoin as well, because this is a worldwide thing and we're all human beings.
Hey, Roger, we had somebody ask this, or they wanted us to ask you, what do you see being the biggest risk to cryptocurrency as a whole in 2018?
Without a doubt, the biggest risk to cryptocurrency as a whole is governments trying to strangle it before it's gotten mass adoption. And the faster we can get everybody buying their coffee and their baby food and their everything you can think of with Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies, it'll be too late for the politicians to demonize it. If Bitcoin is relegated to only people using it on the dark net to buy, marijuana or other things like that, and a bunch of people speculating with it but not actually using it in commerce, it'll be much, much easier for governments to try and demonize it and say, hey, this is just for a bunch of, drug dealers, terrorists, and money launderers. Whereas if we can get everybody using it for everything, it's too late for governments to demonize it. When that little housewife hears the government trying to say a bad thing about this, she's like, no, wait a minute, I use that to do my shopping on Amazon. There's nothing wrong with this. The politicians are wrong. And so that's the part that's so incredibly frustrating for me, is that we've lost several years of adoption. I think we'd already have, much, much more adoption. The Bitcoin price would probably be, over $100,000 at this point if we hadn't had this bottleneck in Bitcoin adoption and scalability. I know firsthand of a company with more than 150 million users that put their Bitcoin integration on hold because of the scaling issue. And that's, really, really frustrating for me. When I first got involved in Bitcoin, I never, ever, ever thought in a million years that the thing that would hold Bitcoin adoption back would be a bunch of people who claim they like Bitcoin engaging in censorship within the Bitcoin community and then advocating for things that are the exact opposite of what Bitcoin needs for adoption. I never thought they would advocate for that Bitcoin should be slow, expensive to use, and unreliable, but that's exactly what we've had happen. And then they've used all sorts of censorship to promote that view. Like that was inconceivable for me when I got involved in Bitcoin. I thought the governments would be the ones doing that. I never thought it would be people from within. But the other conspiracy side of that theory is maybe these people are being paid by governments to do that sort of thing. A lot of these Twitter accounts and accounts online don't really seem to be real people. They're just using some sort of a icon, and they kind of just say the same sort of stupid stuff all the time. And it doesn't look like there's too much of a thinking person behind a lot of them.
Yeah, it seems kind of tinfoil hatty, but I mean, I've been on Reddit plenty, and that stuff for sure happens 100%. I can tell you how many subreddits I'm on, where it's just like there's the same troll saying the same asinine stuff over and over, and you can argue with as many logical facts as you want to. It doesn't matter. And I'm convinced there are paid trolls, paid shills. Keep an eye out. Think for yourself again.
Yeah, think for yourself is always good advice for everyone, everywhere, every time. Think for yourself.
Yeah. It's kind of a lost art, unfortunately.
Yeah, it totally is, really. Well, Roger, all of us want to thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be on, and what a great conversation I think we all had, and I think people will really come away from this after they listen to this podcast. They'll maybe open their eyes a little bit more. Hopefully, if they're not a Bitcoin Cash supporter, at least hopefully it'll get them to maybe do some research and do some thinking on their own, and maybe strengthen their opinion on one or the other, for sure.
Yeah, and the best advice is if you're not sure, you use something. You can read about it all day long, but the best experience is to actually use it. So download a Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash wallet and give it a try and see for yourself. Try it for yourself and then think for yourself.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you again, Roger. It's been incredible. We're super appreciative of having you on here. I think we all learned a hell of a lot. So thank you again. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you guys for the opportunity.
Thanks, Roger.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks everyone for listening. Tune in for some more episodes. Greatly appreciate the support we've gotten so far. And as always, tip your waitress and take care.
Adios, amigos.
All right. So, doing this free 50 Deluxe giveaway to 2 people. I announced 2 names, 2 winners on the last show. No one that you had 24 hours to get to DM me directly at CryptoDale. Didn't get a DM from either of them, so I redrew for the winner of 250 free Lux, courtesy of the Crypto Street Podcast. Those winners, so the rules, let me say the rules again. You had to retweet a tweet I had, You had to follow myself at CryptoDale and Crypto Street Pod, and then you had to show proof that you subscribed to the podcast. So the two winners that have 24 hours from the release of this episode, it's Porden Jalmer, Pordanjalmer, and Brypto Brazy, Bryptobrazy. You've got 24 hours from the release of this episode to DM myself at CryptoDale with your Lux address, and I'll send you 50 Lux. If I don't hear from you, we'll do this again. Okay?